must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
I'm Paul Mulagoli, a resident in Nyeri County. I've got services, fast delivery of services. Today I've got my clearance from EACC. I've also got my good conduct in less than 30 minutes. So before I could have walked to Nalombi, used my day, and maybe I will not even get all the certificates I required. So I can thank the President of the Republic of Kenya for this initiative of Huduma Kenya. We have got services, free delivery of services, 2 minutes, one is gone, and I recommend him. This is the service we want.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is. It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers,
Yes.
do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa. The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
We discuss Africa. We see what ails Africa. And today, this afternoon, we want to see whether Sudan will permanently remain a sick child of Africa. Is it a permanent sickness? Can we resolve the issues of Southern Sudan? Is it something that has gone wrong for 200 years? There has always been a problem in Southern Sudan, in that great region, starting from all the way the Alimadi Wars and the rest of all what happened until today. Peace seems to be elusive. Why has UN taken slow action? Why hasn't UN set up a tribunal? We want to see a tribunal that will make sure that Southern Sudan people are accountable. Those who committed crimes against the human beings. 20,000 Sudanese perished. They are perished. They are not accountable. Nobody can account for them. And we cannot sit here, go on hammering peace agreements without mechanisms of accountability. If we set a tribunal for Sierra Leone, for Rwanda, for Camera Rouge, we need somebody to stand up for the poor masses, the masses that have died, the masses that continue to die, the masses that are being brutalized, murdered, maimed on a daily basis by marauding armies of both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. There must be an accountability. You are not going to sit here and tell people there is no accountability in Southern Sudan. There must be a tribunal. Why do we run to harass countries of Kenya? Put ICC on Kenya, put ICC on this country, put ICC on Central African Republic. Why have we delayed on putting a tribunal for Southern Sudan to find out who is killing, who has been killing, how they have been killing people? Let me speak for the people in Southern Sudan, the women, the children who have not gone to school, the children who have no medicine, the children who have nothing, who have been running since 2013, and the war cannot end because of two people. Let them face the tribunal. I'm not going to keep quiet as a Pan-African to see Southern Sudan being maimed, being tortured, being cut, dismembered, and we keep quiet and watch people got images of people, of malcontents singing to us in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, telling us they have money. Let them face the international tribunal and tell the tribunal who gave them the guns, where they buying them, how they were killing people. Enough of it, enough. Enough is enough for Africa. We have had enough. There is no need of that anymore. Enough is enough. And if people have died, they will not cry. We people who are left on planet Earth must cry for them. We must find justice for them. We must make sure that there are leaders who go on bragging on television stations all over the world, who are accountable. They must be behind bars.
First of all, let me thank you. I've prepared 2 papers which I believe will be circulated because they'll not be projected. But if you can see, first of all, I want to agree with the Honorable Minister. I've done 2 pictorials. One of them is described as Africa at the dinner table. And if you look at Africa at the dinner table, Africa is on a plate and it is meat. And the diners at the dinner table are France, the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union, the Chinese, and progressively the Arabs. And my second picture is the African hotspots. It's not visible from there. But if you look at Africa today, and you make a clean sweep with your mind, there are different conflicts of different intensity in Somalia, in northern Mauritania, in northern Mali, in Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea-Bissau, in the Cameroons, in South Sudan, and one can go on and on. And there is a sense in which Africa has always been alive to the question of interference. I will refer this audience, particularly those who are starting, to take time and read the 32 odd speeches that were made in the month of May 1963 by the then heads of states and government of independent African states, the 32 of them. And there are 2 speeches that I want to isolate for this presentation. One was by David Dacko of Central African Republic. And in thanking Emperor Haile Selassie and Kwame Nkrumah on that day, he said that we must never forget that the colonial power has not left us. We must recognize that he did not go willingly. And if we don't check them, they'll come back again. And what would little Central African Republic do against them? Today, he is right. Today, if we remember the activities of France and how they have propped up the regime of Jean Bedel Bokassa, he was right. Today, as the Honorable Minister has indicated, Africa remains the only continent in the world that is referred to in these terms, Anglophone, to mean that we are a sphere of our erstwhile colonizers. About 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting of the Commonwealth in London, England, and a friend of mine who is an Anglophile sent me the photograph very gleefully, saying this is a meeting of 53 equal states. I told him, no. If it was so, why is it that the leadership of the Commonwealth is hereditary rather than rotational? In other words, in the minds of the British, her former colonies are still under her tutelage. And I want to submit to us that in the minds of what I'll call the conceptual West, they think they have a divine duty to instruct Africans what to do. True. And in the minds of many African leaders, they think that they have a divine duty to accept what they are told. That, in my view, is what the Honorable Minister was talking about, the mindset. And this is something that has been examined. We have seen France and its very pernicious presence in Africa. We know what they did in Burkina Faso against Thomas Sankara. We know what they did in Mali or the Sudan against Modibo Keita or against Sekou Touré in Guinea. Pernicious to the core. The Portuguese, we know what battles had to be fought in that area. And let me put this very bluntly. When the former leader of Portugal, Marcelo Caetano, was asked, why can you not allow the colonies to gain independence? This is what he said in substance. As I have examined world history over the years, the following have emerged. That the Caucasians have been responsible for monumental discoveries in the development of man. So have the Chinese, so have the Arabs. But the Africans have been responsible for nothing. They are only fit as hewers of wood and drawers of water. And I want to submit to you who are present here that in the conceptual West's unguarded moments, that is what they think. And that is how they relate to Africa. So the whole idea that they will interfere is something that they think is their God-given duty. I said there were two speeches in 1963 that I wanted to refer to. I referred to David Dako. The second one was the speech by Kwame Nkrumah. And Kwame provided the solution. He did not complain about colonialism. He said, we must live here with one army, with one command. We must live here with one currency. We must live here with one currency, one country. I do not know where its capital will be, but I suggest Leopoldville or Bangui. Other leaders may have their thoughts. Kwame was right. But who listened to him? Several years down the line, and I've said it in my paper, there were coup d'etats which were engineered, there were mutinies which were engineered, and other forms of destabilization. And I want to believe that the person who actually said it very well in the 1980s was the former American President Ronald Reagan. He said, the United States of America does what is in her best interest. And I agree with him. Does Africa do what is in her best interest? Do African leaders do what is in the best interest of Africa? Interference will be there in very blatant and brazen ways and in subtle ways. I've always asked, until very recently, how many African countries manufactured bullets? Very few. Until very recently, how many African countries, in fact, how many African countries manufacture jet fighters? How many African countries are involved in the arms industry? Some of the leading conceptual West countries which pontificate to us about prizes, peace prizes, are the leading manufacturers of landmines. And if you look at their foreign exchange earners, it is the military and security items. So they say with their mouths, what do they not believe in their hearts? In Kiswahili we say, vita vya panzi furaha ya kunguru. That when the locusts are fighting, it is the joy of the hawk. Because when they kill each other, they get the food easily, dead. It is in the best interest, I dare submit, without fear of contradiction, that the elite in the conceptual West does not want Africa to stabilize, despite their assertion to the contrary. And you'll see it in every country, because conflict is a major industry. Today, you look at South Sudan and the many peace conferences that are being held, but if you ask who supplies the arms, who provides safe havens, it is the conceptual West. And when I use the term conceptual West, I'm saying that it extends to countries which are geographically not in the West, like Australia or Canada. So I'm submitting in answer to your question, Joe, that interference is there, and it is part, to use this old cliche, of the neo-colonial project. The neo-colonial project requires that Africa must remain within the sphere of influence of these states. Today, if you look at the United Kingdom, which has left Europe, one would have thought that those are their cousins and that they should sit in comfort with them. You will now see their involvement being de-emphasized in Europe and their interest and appetite growing towards the Commonwealth. Because in the Commonwealth, they are the major domos. They'll tell us what to do. In Europe, they have to grapple with the Germans and the French, and they don't like it. That is the unspoken bit of it. The French also are in Europe, but the Germans are too strong, and they don't like it. So they want to hold Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, and tell them what to do. I do not know how many of you saw the press conference that was attended by President Macron of France and Nana Addo of Ghana. And when Nana Addo spoke as an African should, you could see the body language of the French president. How dare this man speak this way? In other words, I'm saying that interference is the mother's milk of European economies. But to answer your second question, they have their own recruits who Professor Philip Nying'ura will be speaking here. To use the old vocabulary of those days, they have the people you call their comprador bourgeoisie. You must remember. The comprador bourgeoisie are Africans with black faces, but essentially they are doing the bidding of these powers. They are the ones you'll find them in different spheres. And they will be present. They are in your cabinet, but they are actually representatives of the foreign intelligence agencies of those countries. We know this. If you look at the declassified papers from the United States, we now know that some of leading cabinet ministers in many African countries were working for the CIA or some Western agencies. So you are sitting in cabinet, and in these days of the mobile phone, they are possibly texting their masters in Europe and America. So interference is also exacerbated by these comprador bourgeois for their own benefits. And it has never changed, Honorable Minister. In the early days of slavery, they gave some of the chiefs mirrors and alcohol. Today, what they give them are flats in Paris or in Dubai. And that is what makes them undermine Africa. The third mode of interference is through institutions. Look at the competition as it is now. There is a new entrant into the market that is called China. China is very subtle. Many people wrote the obituary of Rwanda in 1994. 20 years down the line, it has been demonstrated that Africans can actually do it. Between 1983 and 1987, I think Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso also demonstrated that it can be done. We saw in Somalia, despite their problem. So my prescription is African unity. Africa must now begin to negotiate initially in terms of blocks, SADC, ECOWAS, East African Community, and ultimately as African Union. And lo and behold, we must do it. And I've always said this cliche, we must do it, because if we don't do it, we will be done. Thank you.
Indeed, it is a very good morning to you. The day is 25th of April 2019, and it is on a Thursday, bright and early today in Nairobi, just a few minutes past 11 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Good Morning Africa, coming to you all the way from Kenya's capital in Nairobi, and my name is Miriam Ogutu. I'll be joined later on by Dr. Matanga to continue with the rest of the show. And of course, today we'll be looking at has the war on corruption drifted Kenya apart, and spotlight on graft in the judiciary. And also on the diaspora dispatches, we'll seek to look at, is Africa going through a voluntary recolonization? Are we being recolonized? And this time we seem to be the ones allowing this to happen, even as we give room to some of these things and some of these external influences that seems to be very keen to the scramble of Africa seems to have started all over again. We see a lot of activities from countries like Russia, China, and a lot of countries out there who have a very keen eye on the wealth that Africa has been endowed with, especially the natural resources. And they're coming in different forms, in terms of wanting to improve our infrastructure, wanting to fight terrorism, wanting to improve our education. But all this, when you look at it very keenly, there is an underlying thing, a benefit that they're gain that they seem to want to have from the continent. So that is something that we'll be looking at. Is Africa going through voluntary recolonization at the top of the hour in Diaspora Dispatches? But for now, I would like us to look at the news that is making headlines this morning from Africa. And we start with Sudan, where protesters in Sudan have threatened that they will today go on 1 million people march, a protest if the military leaders don't swiftly transfer the power to a civilian administration. This comes after African heads of state met in Cairo, Egypt on Tuesday and agreed to give Sudan's ruling military council 3 months to implement democratic reforms and a peaceful transition. The protest movement, which announced Sunday the suspension of talks with the military council, considers the latter to be an extension of Bashir's regime. And still in Sudan, 3 of the most controversial figures in Sudan's ruling transitional military council have offered their resignation, one of the key demands of the protest movement. The 3 were seen as staunch Islamists and allies of dispossessed President Omar al-Bashir. It follows talks between the military council and protest leaders who were demanding a rapid handover to a civilian administration. We move on to Ethiopia, where China has cancelled all interest-free loans it had advanced to Ethiopia at the end of the year 2018. The Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's office confirmed on Wednesday. Analysts estimate that since 2000, Ethiopia has borrowed over $12 billion from China, including funding for the Addis Ababa-Djibouti electric railway, a line linking the country with Djibouti, its main import-export route. We go on to the DRC, where the lawmakers in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Wednesday elected Janine Mabunda as head of the National Assembly. Mabunda was the only candidate fielded for the position after her main opponent, Henry Thomas Lokondo, was disqualified. The main opposition boycotted the process, citing political maneuvering. The new speaker belongs to the Common Forum for Congo, FCC coalition, which is led by former President Joseph Kabila. She also got the backing of President Tshisekedi's coalition. And in South Africa, at least 60 people were reported dead and hundreds displaced in the aftermath of torrential rains and landslides that swept the eastern parts of South Africa. Floods, collapsed buildings, and mudslides from the heavy rains that poured from Monday can be seen across the most affected areas, mainly the port city of Durban and KwaZulu-Natal province. And in Libya, African leaders meeting in Cairo on Tuesday called for an immediate and unconditional halt to fighting in Libya. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who hosted the meeting, said leaders should develop a coherent regional response to the crisis in Libya, warning against a slide into chaos. The AU's Libya Troika, which includes Sisi and his Rwandan and South African counterparts, urged all parties to act with restraint and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid. And we go to Rwanda, where the Supreme Court of Rwanda has rejected a challenge to a law which says it is a crime to insult the president. The law, which was introduced last year, means that anyone insulting President Paul Kagame faces between 5 to 7 years of prison term. Lawyer Richard Mugisha, who urged that the law was unconstitutional and as it undermined the freedom of expression, the court ruled that it should remain due to the responsibility that the office holds. And we come on to Tanzania, where authorities in southern Tanzania have ordered workers and school children to remain at home as the country braces for a cyclone Kenneth. Mtwara Regional Commission, Gelasius Biakanwa, issued the directive at the Tanzania Meteorological Agency, warned that winds up to 200 kilometers per hour and torrential rain could hit the Lindi, Mtwara, and Ruvuma regions. Authorities have urged people to live in mud houses to move to safe areas. And still in Tanzania, on Tuesday denied blocking the publication of a critical International Monetary Fund report that accuses President John Magufuli's government of undermining economic growth, which has unpredictable and interventionist policies. In the leaked report seen by Reuters last week, and which the IMF said was not made public after Tanzania authorities did not consent to its publication, the fund said a weak business environment and the implementation of projects that may not have high rates of return were likely to constrain annual GDP growth for Tanzania. We go on to Egypt, where now Egyptians have overwhelmingly approved in a referendum constitutional changes that could allow President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to stay in power until 2013. The National Election Authority said 88.8% of those who took part endorsed the proposals. The turnout was 44.3%. Mr. Sisi's second term has been extended for 4 to 6 years, and he will be allowed to seek one more term in 2024. The changes also expand the military power to intervene in politics and give Mr. Sisi more power over the judiciary. And the U.S. plane maker Boeing has reported 20% fall in profits for the first quarter of the year because of the lower deliveries of its 737 MAX. It has also withdrawn its profit forecast for 2019 as it scrambles to get the model back in the air following 2 deadly accidents. The company said it will be issuing a new forecast when it has more clarity about the issues surrounding the plane involved in crashes in Ethiopia in March and Indonesia last October. And we go on to Ghana, where now Ghana has launched a drone delivery service to deliver medicine to remote parts of the country that was hard hit, that was hard to reach by road. President Nana Akufo-Addo described the initiative as a major step towards giving every Ghanaian access to life-saving medicine. A US-based company, Zipline, is behind the project and is due to be paid $12 million for running the service for the next 4 years. And in Nigeria, Nigeria's Labour Minister says he's not concerned by doctors moving abroad in search of work because the country has enough medical personnel. Speaking of the problem of the so-called brain drain, the minister argued that Nigeria had too many doctors and could afford to export their talent. And in other news, Uganda's Bwindi Forest, Kenya's Samburu National Reserve, and Morocco's Mount Toubkal have been named among 25 most beautiful places in the world. This is according to a survey that was done by CNN Travel. The list of breathtakingly beautiful places was compiled by the American media channel in commemoration of Earth Day and shared to tip travelers on which places they could visit this year. So that is some very good news from the continent. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Good Morning Africa. Remember, that is just the latest, the news headlines making headlines this morning in Africa. And wherever you're watching us from, thank you so much for joining. And if there's anything that the rest of the world need to know, then please, you can share with me on our platform, and I will read it and share it with the rest of the world. Dr. Matanga will be joining me in a bit, and we'll be going through some of the topics. Has the war on corruption drifted Kenya apart? And spotlight on graft in the judiciary. And on Diaspora Dispatches, we'll be seeking to look at is Africa going through voluntary recolonization? Remember, it seems as though there's a new scramble, for Africa that is equivalent to what was happening in the 1800s. And of course, colonial powers were fought to which one of them will dominate which parts of Africa. And then they used a bit of force and things like that. But now the fight for Africa and the scramble for Africa is viciously coming. Only this time, it's coming in very subtle ways, and we are not able to really realize how this is happening. You look at a country like China, one of the world's largest, emerging investors, is ramping up in investments in sub-Saharan Africa, and really what it is, it's in search of its natural resources, but whether, especially the investments it's making on the continent, if it's beneficial for the continent in the long run, and what China even stands to gain from the continent, this is a question that still is really we seek to answer if really the relationship is out of mutual benefits for both the continent and China, and also countries like Russia, countries like the United States, countries like the UK, across Europe. We see them coming, and sometimes they have all this vested interest in different countries across Africa, but only this time our leadership, the leadership across all these different African countries, actually allow them. They come in with a very shiny bag of goodies, and I think our leaders can just help themselves. But in the long run, are we opening up ourselves to be colonized again by these powers? Have we allowed ourselves to be colonized again? And I was just going through some very interesting articles about this matter. And so this is a conversation we'll be having when Dr. Matanga, joins us on top of the hour. And just a very quick one. In 1965, Nigeria was richer than Indonesia. Did you know that? In 1965, Nigeria was richer than Indonesia, and Ghana was richer than Thailand. And today, Indonesia is 3 times richer than Nigeria, and Thailand 5 times richer than Ghana. And in 1965 also, Uganda was richer than South Korea. Yes, take a moment and just take that in. And in 1967, Zambia also was richer than South Korea. Zambia had a per capita income of $200 US dollars, and South Korea had about $120 US dollars. And then after 30 years, South Korea's gross domestic product per person was more than $10,000 US dollars. that was about in 1998, and Zambia was about $400. So where exactly have we gone wrong? And Africa being one of the richest countries in Africa, in the world, continents in the world, these are questions we need to ask ourselves. And these people come and they realize the wealth that we have, and they come in very subtly with this, bilateral trade, bilateral mutual, relationship between the different countries. But in the real sense, is Africa mutually benefiting from these relationships we're having with the outside world? Or are we just opening up ourselves to being colonized? Because if you can't even take care of our own wealth, we still need them to come in and invest, to come and dig these mines, to come and dig our oil, to come and... We've opened ourselves for a recolonization without even knowing it. So that is something that we'll be looking at the top of the hour. I see that you're already writing in. Let me just read some of your comments before we just go through some of the news making headline in Africa, the news that I just read, and we start with Ari. Ari, you're saying good morning. I can... all right, I think you're commenting on the clip you just played before the show started. And all right, Lual Dengakun, thank you so much. I think, yes, we'll look through to that. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Remember, Dr. Matsanga will be joining me in a bit. And Ransuma Namtum, you're saying, why can the money not be used in construction of roads rather than paying for the drones? The news I just read. But there's also another, the same I was watching about Rwanda just a few weeks ago. They have the same thing. Yes, I was just thinking, instead of getting drones to deliver medicine in remote places that infrastructure is poor, why can't they just have a long-term solution that could not only help in the delivery of the medicine, but also other very vital services that the people from those remote places require? Perhaps they're farmers, they're farming vegetables or things like that, and they have to deliver it to the market. The drones can't do that. So having drones to deliver medicine to the most remote places with poor infrastructure, while it is a very good thing and should be applauded, I don't think it is the best solution in the long term. And looking at, in terms of even economies of scales, like what is that? It's just the medicine. So maybe in this case, as much as this is kudos to Ghana for doing that, maybe improvement of infrastructure, as you have suggested here, Ransoma Nantum, that could be a very good idea. Just improve the infrastructure, period. That would help. Yes, it did. So thank you so much. Chol Makor, you're saying, good morning, African, wake up, African. Yes, indeed. And where you're saying African leadership has plunged Africans into such dilemma situations of neo-colonization. They are trapped in reckless borrowing, I'm telling you. And Jennifer Muller, nice to see you again this morning. You're saying Africa, our continent suffering because of lack of knowledge and wisdom, sorry to say. You think because of lack of knowledge of wisdom, or we just add that ignorance? Or is that the lack of, because we know, sometimes we know the right thing to do, but we choose not to do it, I think. Corey Eric, you're saying African leaders are the problems too long in power, like Uganda. All right. Lanang Kado, you're saying Africa need young politicians, leaders, not those of 1930 to 1950s born who are just after the Westerners. All right, keep writing to me, and while you do that, please, I would like to know where you're watching us from this morning. So some of the news I just went through this morning. Okay. We'll obviously start with Sudan, still making headlines. And today the protesters in Sudan have said they're going to have a 1 million people march protest if the military leaders don't swiftly transfer the power to a civilian administration. On Tuesday, remember, the leadership of African Union met in Egypt, and they allowed Sudan another 3 months to constitute transitional administration and to hand over, I think, power to a civilian administration. And but the protesters don't want to hear that. And so they want a civilian administration now and now. They do not want to hear about, we need more time to, to make this happen. And the army had given them an option and told them to, suggest names that people they would want, civilians that they would want to be, represent them or to take over leadership as per now. They were actually given that mandate. We haven't had any activists or any part of the organizers of the protest who have come out and said, you know what, we've settled on this person. We think he's going to be a very good representative from now, so you can have it. So we've not heard that from him. So I do not understand how they expect the army to to give them a civilian administration. I think they also have a responsibility to just work with the army and find the right person that would help in the transition of Sudan as the matters stand right now. So them demanding and not being part of the solution, I think also now it's becoming, it's a bit confusing because they were told to offer a name, to flaunt a name or names, and then they would agree which person would lead them. The organizers of the protest, together with the activists and everybody who was the Sudan professionals, remember the lawyers, the doctors, and top Sudan professionals were actually very much so involved in this, in organizing this protest. So now they were given a chance to get a name and take to the army people and see if these people can talk and agree on settling in for that person, and they've not done that. So I don't know what at this point what exactly they want. So today they've organized a 1 million march to near the military headquarters, and we'll see how that plays out. I think probably it's already taking place right now as you speak, but I think we will update you in our next broadcast on what is really happening and the situation in Sudan. And if Dr. Matanga joins me here later, perhaps we'll get in touch with our correspondent all the way from Khartoum, and perhaps he could give us the latest in what is happening from the streets of Khartoum and other parts of Sudan. Remember, yesterday a train arrived with more protesters from across Sudan, and so there are more people over there. So that tells you it's a very well calculated, protest. Yeah, I'll just leave that in that. And of course, right now, 3 of the most controversial figures on Sudan's ruling transitional military council have offered their resignation. Remember, the protesters were saying no. While having these people there, it will be like a continuation of Omar al-Bashir's rule, because these 3 key figures, they're said to be staunch Islamists and are very close allies to the former President Omar al-Bashir. So the protesters didn't want them to be part of the new military council. Say they offered to step aside, so they resigned, I think, yesterday, if I'm not wrong. And now, of course, talking about is Africa going through voluntary recolonization right now. And now you come here and I read things like China has cancelled an interest-free loan it had advanced to Ethiopia at the end of 2018. Yes, and it is believed that the loan was amounting to $12 billion. And so China just decided it will cancel. The loan was meant to fund the Addis Ababa Djibouti Electric Railway. So after somebody has cancelled all that money and they've just given you all that money, and now when they come to your country and they have other interest, you really can't say no. You've sort of given them a say and a voice. They sort of have a right, So this is the quagmire, and this is the catch-22 that Africa finds itself today. We are being recolonized. Only this time we are allowing it to happen to us, as opposed to what was happening in the 1800s when the scramble for Africa began. So it's interesting times in Africa. And of course, our leaders are very happy to just keep borrowing. And borrowing is not bad, as you were talking about yesterday, but as long as it is sustainable and the economy of that country is able actually to, pay back this money, it's not a problem. Sometimes we need a little help to help with the infrastructure and our developments, because, Africa for a long time after the colonization, we were behind because of reasons like that. So we're just playing catch up while the rest of the world advanced. As I read earlier there, some of the African countries that were at par with some of these nations that now are leading economies in the world, but it's because of what was happening in Africa at that time that really held us back. So that left us very confused. So we are now just playing catch up with the rest of the world. So whichever way we are trying to catch up in terms of development and improving over our nations, I think we're doing it by all means necessary. It's sometimes not understanding the hefty price that might come with that, and that might include, giving too much power to some foreign interest countries. So yes. And of course, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, yesterday, they had their first woman national speaker of the assembly. Her name is Janine Mabunda, and of course she comes from the Common Forum for Congo, and that is the party, the coalition that is led by former President Joseph Kabila. So that is a good thing. And President Tshisekedi also gave his blessings. He's okay with that. And this lady, of course, ran unopposed. There was nobody to oppose her because her main challenger was disqualified on certain grounds. I'm not sure which. His name was Henry Thomas Lukondo. And so she won, and now she is the Speaker of the Congo DR National Assembly. And of course, the main opposition, I think, that is led by Martin Fayulu, boycotted, citing political maneuvering. So Fayulu is still very disgruntled, and his coalition was not very happy with that. His party, rather, and so they boycotted the whole process. They did not participate. His party did not participate in the elections of the House Speaker for the DR Congo Parliament. And of course, the torrential rains is really causing havoc across Africa. It's just yesterday, some people died in Tanzania and parts of Uganda, and today we see 60 people have died in South Africa, in the port city of Durban and KwaZulu-Natal province. So the rains are really pouring. And today I was reading from an international media outlet, and there's a man who lost his family, his wife and kids, who are just swept away by the rains. So that is very sad news. And of course, there was an alert given yesterday. I think in Tanzania, they're expecting, what is it? Is it a cyclone or that is about to happen? So it's really it's worrying. And even today, cyclone, it's called Cyclone Kenneth, and authority in southern Tanzania have ordered workers and school children to remain at home as the country braces for Cyclone Kenneth. It is supposed to happen, I think, today, and in regions like Lindi, Mtwara, and Ruvuma. And of course, authorities have urged people who live in the mud houses to find safe areas. So this is also something that is worrying. And the winds are said to be coming up to 200 kilometers per hour. That is really deadly. So we're just praying for the people who are likely to be hit by this, and we're praying that it doesn't become as devastating as it were in Mozambique. And also Mozambique is expected to also experience Cyclone Kenneth. So it's just a month after the cyclone Idai. So really, Africa, yes, these are effects. Climate change is real. Yes, so people who think this is just a hoax, climate change is real. You mess up with Mother Nature, it does not play. This is what you get. And so people for a long time have, neglected. And when you talk about preserving the environment and things like that, they think this is just a white man's something. No. Climate change is real, and things like this never used to happen in Africa. Now the next thing you'll hear, we're having hurricanes. Can you believe that? So we're just praying for the people who have been affected and the devastation that is going, and for the people who have lost their loved ones, we're just sending our condolence sense out there. So Andrew Bett, you're saying it's what's the point in pointing it out? It's obvious. We highly celebrate corrupt leaders. As long as you're rich, you've made it, regardless how you've made it. Okay, Andrew Bet, thank you so much. And Chiboy, you're saying good morning, Biafra, good morning. And Omboy, you're saying African rulers are scrambling for power while the Asian countries are focused on economic and technological development. And Omboy, just yesterday, I think you're having close to a similar conversation here with Dr. Matanga, and you're saying, okay, fine, I know we complain so much and how much influence China right now is gaining in Africa and how much it's really like China is present in Africa right now, right? But instead of complaining, could we maybe take a pause and perhaps learn from them in terms of what is it they're doing that is different, that is working for them, that maybe we can borrow as a continent so that we can be self-sufficient and not, always when we're looking for engineers or for contractors to build our roads, then we have to go to China, we have to go to Japan, and yet we have all these wonderful universities where we have engineers graduating each year. It just beats all logic. I do not even understand. But maybe we could pause and see how can we learn from these people and take that knowledge and better ourselves so that we don't have to always go for them whenever we need things done in this continent. Maybe that could be. That could be a solution. But anyway, just keep sending me your thoughts, even as we wait for Dr. Matanga to join us, to join me on set. And now the leaders, of course, Africa leadership are meeting to deliberate on matters Sudan. Remember, as I've mentioned earlier, the AU added Sudan 3 months to constitute a transitional administration and to deliver a civilian administration. I think it's very important. The ultimatum that they had given for 15 days, I think that was just too soon and it was not very practical. So at the same time, while they were looking at that, they're also looking at the developments of events that are happening in Libya, and now the African leaders are meeting in Cairo, where they're meeting on Tuesday. They called for immediate and unconditional halt to fighting in Libya. Who are they addressing this to? General Haftar. This guy... Anyway, so Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who hosted the meeting, said leaders will develop a coherent regional response to the crisis in Libya, warning that if they don't, then Libya could slide back into chaos. But Libya has been in chaos since 2011 after the ousting of Colonel Gaddafi, I think. Since 2011, I don't think Libya has known peace since then. So just calling and issuing warnings like this and immediate and unconditional halt, that's all the AU can do. I think AU needs to do more in the situation in Libya. Unfortunately, there are also vested interests, even in some African leadership, that support parts of fractions of what is happening right now in Libya, and I think that is the sad part. So just issuing warnings like that, General Haftar is not going to pay attention to that, really. He's not. He's fighting with a government that, UN recognizes. So AU is just going to come there and issue a warning like that. What are you doing? What can other African countries instead do to help, ease out this civil war and the war that is really claiming so many innocent lives in Libya? That is the kind of solutions they need to be getting, not just issuing empty rhetorics. I don't think the players there really will pay attention to that. That is very inconsequential. And something else very interesting in Rwanda. And now, the Supreme Court in Rwanda has rejected a challenge to a law which says it is a crime to insult the president. The law, which was introduced last year, means that anyone insulting President Paul Kagame faces between 5 and 7 years in prison. By insulting, I mean, you cannot even do a caricature on President Paul Kagame. You'll be jailed between 5 to 7 years. You can't even be a comedian and make jokes on President Paul Kagame. Yes. Mild dictatorship, I call it. You can't. They're saying that the court rule that it should remain due to the responsibility that the office hold. So you can't, not just the president, even any public official. So you cannot write anything that is deemed to make fun. Even on a lighter note, you can't do that. It is considered as an insult to the president and to the office of presidency. So you can't do that. So if you go to Rwanda, please just mind. If you're a comedian and you have to make jokes, you must understand your prerogatives. Otherwise, you're going to land in jail 5 to 7 years in prison. I don't know what you think about that, but you can tell me your thoughts on that. As Jennifer Mueller, you're saying, who controls those imported medicines from Africa? We've seen scandals for fake, even expired medicines being sold to African countries. Okay, let me look for that story and tell you. Actually, the farm that is behind a U.S. I'm glad you asked. A U.S.-based company called Zipline is behind the project and is due to be paid $12 million US for running the service for the next 4 years. You're welcome. Yes, it had to be an international firm, not. It had to be. Even the one in Rwanda, I think, is one of those countries from out there, not from Rwandese themselves. So. But it's really working well. But Jennifer, as one of our viewers just up there had mentioned, what is the use of hiring these drones? 12, let me see. Let me just confirm the money once again. All right, so $12 million US. Can that not fix a rural road, even upgrade or just something, just add a few more millions? And that is per year, so I don't know how long this farm will be working for, but if that money was channeled towards improving of infrastructure in those rural areas, I think that will make more sense to even the locals, because they'll not just use it for the medicine, they can also use it for other, for other purposes. Go to the hospital, for example, transport their farm produce, for example, walk to school without worrying, things like that. So I think our priorities and how we do our things in Africa sometimes really, it's quite wanting, and you wonder. So now there's this new, yesterday, one of the news making headlines in Kenya, just before we go for a break, and I'll be coming back shortly, and even as Dr. Matanga is just about to join me, but very quickly. In one of the dailies in Kenya this morning, specifically the Daily Nation, the members of parliament vote to kick out Huduma Number farm. Now, this farm is the one that has been contracted to carry out the Huduma Number. The registration, the NIMS registration, right now that is happening in Kenya. And the members of parliament are saying this farm, first of all, by the time it was going into contract with the government to provide for this service, it was not legally registered in this country. So that is number one. Number two, this very farm, in 5 years, has changed its name 3 times. In 2013, it was called Saffron Morpho, and it is the one that provided for the BVR kits for the registration, biometric registration in Kenya elections in 2013. And in 2017, it changed its name to OT Morpho, and it's the one that took care of the Kenya's elections. That was very, very controversial, almost plunged this country into another chaos. So it was responsible for that in 2017 elections. And now this firm has changed its name to Idemia Securities. So they're asking why, because this is very curious. So now they've been awarded a 6.8 billion tender to carry out this the Huduma Number registration, and also they are seeking to be the ones to, manage to take care of the population census that is coming up in August, and just asking the Huduma Number we are doing now, and then we have to do the population census in August. Kenya, we have a lot of money that Anyway, so the farm has been awarded 6.8 billion Kenya shillings, the tender. And the farm, by the time it was getting this tender, and it got this tender very controversially, it had not even been registered in Kenya, as it will be required by the company law in Kenya, that before you operate, you must be registered in the country. And it had not been registered locally. Of course, the Parliamentary Accounts Committee wants the farm to be blocked to do any business in this country at least for 10 years. And Of course, now we'll see how that will play. Remember, the Huduma number registration is continuing, and it was launched on the 3rd of April, and all major leaders in this country were, behind the registration, and everybody joined hands. But now, with all these controversies surrounding this company that has changed names several times and has been involved in the most controversial tenders and election scandals that really almost plunged this country into chaos, was it even wise to the government or to the ministry responsible to give this farm another contract? It is a French farm. You remember, initially it was known as Saffron Mofo. That was in 2013. It was responsible for the BVR kits. And the registration, it's applied, and it was still very controversial. And in 2017, it came with the name OT Mofo, and it was responsible for the elections in 2017. And now it's come back, and it's calling itself Idemia. Why are they even changing names? Yeah, it is a French farm. So we're just waiting. So the members of parliament have voted to actually kick out the Huduma number. But during an interview by the Daily Nation yesterday, let me just look for it. During government spokesperson Eric Kiraithe said that the Huduma number listing drive will, in the meantime, continue despite Parliament's move, as the registration is a national exercise with clear objectives. So despite Parliament voting for this farm to stop doing what it's doing, the government spokesperson has said, you know what, the drive will continue, and because it is a national exercise with very clear objectives. All right. And while speaking to the Nation on Forum last evening, Mr. Kiraithe, however, said that the government was still studying the decision by Parliament. So he's saying the government is still looking as to what is happening and the concerns that was raised by Parliament, and it is still studying before it decides on the next course of action. I think that the government should just have given a different farm, very important tender to another farm. And I just don't know why they're insisting on this French farm. Maybe Dr. Matanga can give us, a highlight on why. He probably has a better understanding on what is happening, so he will shed some light on that. He could be having some information that I don't. Maybe they're the best in the world, I don't know. But after the several times that they've had, interaction, especially in very sensitive, the elections and the BVR, and every time they've had controversies with this farm, and they still chose it to carry out this very important, exercise. It will start raising eyebrows. And when you're seeing members of parliament now starting to query this, and some of these concerns are legit, then now Huduma number, as much as it's I think it is very good for the country, now it will just throw all this into jeopardy. And remember, it has already a 6.8 billion tender, and is still looking to be the one that is carrying out the population census in August. Yes, it just beats all the logic. So that is what is happening in this country. And of course, that is making headlines in Kenya this morning. And DP Ruto is said to have been denied access to former president of Kenya, Moi's Kabarak home. Remember, the former president lost his firstborn son a few days ago. And the vice president wanted to go there and condole with the family. And it is said that allegedly, he was directed to go to the house of the deceased, and he was not able to go to the former president's home in Kabarak. So instead he went to Jonathan's home in a different place. So that is just politics that has been playing out in the Rift Valley, and of course the rift between the Baringo Senator Gideon Moi and perceived rift with the VP, William Ruto. It is said they've not been in the very best terms. And so the VP also came out and said, no, we did not want to go see the former president. We wanted to condole with the family of Jonathan. And so that's why we chose to go to his home instead of going to the former president's home in Kabarak. Remember, all high visiting, condoling, VIPs are going to the former president's home in Kabarak. So, and you would expect the vice president of this country, that is where he would go. But, those are just politics in Kenya. So what I will do now, I will take a very short break. And when I come back, Jennifer Mueller, you're saying Huduma number plus Wi-Fi, a sign, I smell a rat. Our big brother watching us. How good is Africa technologically? Samuel Lay, you're saying, let me just read some of this before I take that break. You're saying there's more than dictator for Rwanda. I know. It was subtle. But now I think it's becoming very evident, right? But it's a dictatorship that is working, I hear. Rwanda is a very safe place. Rwanda is there's no corruption. So maybe maybe if the dictatorship is working, so maybe it's good for the people. I don't know. And then Nameka Nwecha, you're saying, good morning, Africa. May God help us all indeed. May God help us. And Jennifer, you're saying today it's even more dangerous with this high technology. And Ombu, you're saying, I love the Sudan determination. AU is useless. Where were they all this time? AU can't just come in when the people of Sudan have toppled dictator Bashir, whom the AU was dining with. In fact, the AU came out and, they castigated even the move of when Bashir was removed. They really did not like that. But of course, it's led by African leadership, so we don't expect them to really agree with that. So they came out and they condemned the toppling of Bashir. So, but I'm happy that they've given them 3 months to do that, because they have a mandate. As much as we were wondering where they were when the people of Sudan were toppling the dictator Bashir, but Sudan is part of AU, and you cannot be an AU member if you're led. You have a military. You're led by the military. You can't do that. So they need to have a civilian administrator and a ruler before they can join the AU. So I think that is where the AU is coming from. So now I would like us to take a short break. And when I come back, we'll look at the rest of the news. And also remember, we'll be looking at has the war on corruption drifted Kenya apart, and also a spotlight on graft in the judiciary, and also on the top of the hour, which I think already we're on the top of the hour. We'll look at diaspora dispatches, where we'll be seeking to see, is Africa going through voluntary recolonization? Please let me know your thoughts. You can write it on the comment section, and I'll be reading them as we continue with the show. So let me just take a very short break. Please don't go too far. Good morning, Africa. We'll be right back.
To be here today to participate with my brothers and sisters in this very important forum when we are reflecting and thinking about our country. When we are thinking about our country, we are thinking about ourselves, our people at home, and the generations to come. Mine is to assure you that we are doing our best as far as investigations are concerned. But at the same time, we do have quite a number of challenges, though they have not reached the point of dispiriting us, or rather demotivating us. We are trying to say that I wish everybody in this war of corruption may come on board. One thing I can say is, even before we go for some investigations outside there, some of the frustrations which really pull us down is some of the strange orders that we receive. Other than even starting the investigation, we are stopped even before you record a statement from somebody who you know very well are stolen from Kenyans. You know very well, and all Kenyans know, we are pursuing this person, and it's not something we're imagining. We all know, and we cannot lie to ourselves, surely, and everything can show, but we are stopped even before questioning that person. And when we received some of those Hondas, like another one which I received just the other day, I was not even at the stage of even pursuing that person whatsoever. Then when the Hondas came, I ran them very well. Do not use the door to go and arrest Mr. Hay. Then I said, okay, why is this preemptive? Then I said, fine, I consulted my regular advisors, they are here. And then I said, no, through my information, there is a window. If I cannot use the door to go and take Mr. Hay, then I'm going to use the window. And once I get through the window, I get a smoking gun, which is killing us. Just smoking, just immediately from murdering us Kenyans. When you steal from us, the hospital money, loans money, development fund for this country, what do you think you are? You are not better than that terrorist you are battering there in the Dusit and other areas. Then, immediately, faithfully carrying our smoking gun, then what happened? We are told, don't even bring this smoking gun here. Don't even touch that person. We are bad. Please listen to me. I have it here. Why don't you give me 10 minutes even to demonstrate I'm not malicious? Surely this is what I have. Then if I am, prove me within these 10 minutes. Nobody is ready to listen to us. What I can say is, thank you for prayers and support from Kenyans. I know very well that issue of mafia in Italy. It was completely almost replica, the capture of the mafia. The way the war was won, and the people's cry, they were wiped dry their tears. It was through the corrective working and bravery of their police, prosecution, and judiciary. When most of them, they are on BCD, and then the police said, no, enough is enough. Our people have cried enough. Let's go to fight for our people. In as much some of them were still with the mafia. It was massacre. They said it's okay, let's die, but for the world cause of our people. The prosecution came on board and said, no, equally we hear the cry of our people. Let's join the war. They joined the police, the prosecutors. Then the judiciary came and said, no, then we shall not be left. They came on board. The war was won for their people, ultimately. We can say, equally in Kenya, we can take the cry of our Kenyans and they say, this greed, these millions we are stealing every day, stash them in bank, there are papers, we shall read them in this world. Let us say, what is enough for us is what God has given us. And the moment we say collectively, we are going to fight this war together, I can for sure tell you, this country is beautiful, it has plenty for each and every one of us. And I can for sure we shall have peace of mind. And even during our last days when they do come, even that billionaire and all that, you will be smiling knowing if there is heaven, me I'm a Christian, I believe there is one. At least then have a space after the one hereafter. So that one is to say, continue supporting us, praying for us. We shall do our level best, and we shall give all that we have for the sake of our motherland. Thank you.
Way back in 1998, the late Secretary General of the United Nations by name Kofi Annan thought of an idea, brought an idea of saying the only way to bring world order where crimes committed that are not punishable in local courts, local countries, regional courts could be taken to an international crimes court. The Rome Statute and Rome Treaty of 1998 July was an offspring of already cooked DSGE intelligence system mechanism to keep Africa under check. Up to date, the French government pays 70% of the salaries of the International Criminal Court, from the porter to the judge, to the prosecutor, and the rest of the other people. This was a project of Kofi Annan and the Kofi Annan Foundation, followed by George Soros as an accomplice of Kofi Annan, brought in by Luis Moreno Campo and the entire system of the West, some countries in the West, to keep check on African countries that did not agree with the policies of the French and to their policies of Western culture. The International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Luis Moreno Campo agreed in all this that yes, he has been picking money, extra monies, and we followed the story together with my group in France, powerful investigators in France who worked together with me, and we found out that truly speaking, Luis Moreno Campo, Fernandez Gomedi, the former judge, the president of the International Criminal Court, laundered money, some coming from American banks themselves. This evidence was put in the ICC. In the case of Bashir versus the chief prosecutor, I filed an application which I still have and which I'm going to publicize again so that people can know that I was right. I've been vindicated because the American friends now have found that my credibility is real, that I was right when I stood up to say this court is corrupt. This court launders money, $17 million of United States money, laundered through Bahamas, through New York banks, back to Ocampo's personal assistant, by then called Fernandez Gomedi Silvia, who later on rose to the ranks of becoming the president of International Criminal Court. It has taken us time, energy, efforts, resources to investigate the corruption scandal that have rocked the International Criminal Court. Why should African countries continue to be in the ICC? Yet even the superpowers like America are saying no, we have enough courts to try our own people. Viewers, it has taken Americans over 20 years to listen to our voices when we told Rainberger in Nairobi that this court is a corrupt court.
Today, on the eve of September the 11th, I want to deliver a clear and unambiguous message on behalf of the President of the United States. The United States will use any means necessary to protect our citizens and those of our allies from unjust prosecution by this illegitimate court. We will not cooperate with the ICC. We will provide no assistance to the ICC, and we certainly will not join the ICC. We will let the ICC die on its own. After all, for all intents and purposes, the ICC is already dead to us.
A case of the Kenyan people. These cases in Kenya, the chief prosecutor called Fatou Bensouda put serious statements at the end of the cases, discharge and termination. In legal language, these cases pose a very serious threat in the future. What the people of Kenya can do, and they should do, is today to wrap up the work envelope. Because until this envelope is sealed, thrown in Indian Ocean, the chief prosecutor in the future will come and look for that envelope, use it to incriminate people again. It brings me back to the situation. America is sealing its journey out of the ICC? Why do you wait? Why don't you take this opportunity to seal your journeys out of the ICC? America is quitting, warning that it cannot no longer be a party to such an obnoxious court, a court that has no powers, that talks from this side and vomits from the other side, a court that cuts and pastes evidence, a court that buys witnesses, a court that incites incentives, gives incentives to witnesses of a passport and a relocation, then you tell lies about people. The court that sentences you as per the words there. Why should you leave a country that has a jury that checks on what the judges would do, the excesses of judges, and go to a country, a court that has no jury? Time has come for Africa to think. Do we need this court? Does Africa need this court?
Welcome back. Good afternoon to you. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are watching us from this afternoon. It is about 21 minutes past the top of the hour, past noon here in Nairobi, Kenya. So I don't know what time it is where you're watching me from. This is Good Morning Africa, and just in the first hour of the show, we looked at the news making headlines across Africa, and maybe I'll just do a recap in case you're joining. But right now, I was going through some of one of the Kenyan dailies here, and I see, you know, what is happening in Sudan has taken over the headlines, especially in that part of the world. And we sort of forgot about what is happening in South Sudan. And just the latest here, briefly, I see a headline here, Machar faction could exit peace agreement. So just a quick read. South Sudan main opposition armed faction, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement Army in opposition, SPLM -IO, has threatened to withdraw from the shaky peace process after President Salva Kiir refused to delay the formation of the new unity government. President Kiir insisted last Saturday on forming the new government in May, as stated in the agreement. SPLM-IO Deputy Chairman Henry Odwar said his group would withdraw from the process should President Kiir ignore their wish. Okay, now this is not something you want to hear coming from South Sudan. We all have been, you know, holding our breath and praying for the peace process to finally kickstart in Sudan. Remember, the peace after the peace agreement that was signed last year, I think in Khartoum in September, it was supposed to be implemented starting May next month, just a few days away. And as it is now, of course, that is not possible after the two leaders and other leaders from South Sudan went for the spiritual retreat in Vatican a few days ago, and after the famous kiss, the kiss on their feet by the Pope went very viral across the world. You know, they were told to go back and see that to start the unity government and the peace process to make sure that it's actually implemented. And now, after that, Machar gave an interview to one of the international press, and he said that as the situation is right now in South Sudan, he is not able to go back until some things are assured, especially his security and other things are put in place. So he said that he needs about 6 months. His side of the coalition requires about 6 months for them to actually to make sure that everything is in place and for the ground to be okay for him to come back in Juba and commence the peace process. So last Saturday during the Easter period, the President Salva Kiir came out and extended a hand towards Machar and said, you know what, you come back to Juba and let's kickstart this peace process. And now when you hear such news coming out from the Deputy Chairman of SPLM-IO, Henry Odwar, saying that if Salva Kiir insisted on forming the new government, then they will pull out of the peace agreement. This is not something you want to hear coming from Sudan, from South Sudan, because of course the peace deal has been very shaky, and the world, and indeed Africa and the rest of the world, we have been praying that the war that is being experienced in some parts of South Sudan will stop. The country will be back to normalcy. It has not known peace since 2013, after the two fractions. There was a fracture in government, and Machar exited, and there have been wars from the different camps now, and it's like every tribe has its own army in Southern Sudan. So the major ones. It has been a very dicey situation in South Sudan. So when you hear such statements, and the SPLM-IO coming out and saying that if Salva Kiir insisted on going on to forming this government, they're not going to be part of. Salva Kiir cannot form that unity government without that side. So you are required to come to the drawing table and form this unity government. That is what the unity government will consist. So if you threaten to exit, so that is just, I don't think that will augur well with the people of South Sudan who are tired of, living under insecurity, who are tired of losing innocent lives every other day, who are tired of the bloodshed, who are tired of the difficulties that they have been going through since the starting of the war in 2013. So they just want a break. South Sudanese just want a new start. South Sudanese just want a country that they can be proud of, and they can go to sleep and wake up morning without worrying about, will we wake up alive? Well, am I going to lose one of my siblings again? Am I going to, where women can walk around without feeling the threat of even being raped or being maimed or things like that. South Sudanese have had enough of this, and I think it's a cry. And even not just from South Sudanese, and even for the rest of us Africans, we want to see peace return to South Sudan. And statements like this are not really helping. And so I'm praying that these two leaders can have a consensus. Machar asked for another 6 months. I had mixed feelings about that, but according to, I think the situation right now in South Sudan, apparently it's not very conducive for his return. I do not know where he is. I don't know if he went back to Khartoum after the Rome visit, the Vatican visit. I don't know if he's still in Rome. I have no idea. But that is what is happening right now in South Sudan. So Machar faction of could exit peace deal, and they're threatening that if President Salva Kiir continues or refuses to delay the formation of the new unity government, and then they are threatening to exit the peace agreement. You can't do that, especially after the Pope has kissed your feet. How dare you? You cannot do that. You cannot hold a whole country at arms, because you cannot do that. I think it's time these leaders just put aside their egos. I know there are problems and there are things they should work through. But I think the minute and the moment they realize it is this country is for the bigger good of South Sudanese, not just them. You need people to lead. So when all these people that are ravaged by war, that are by hunger, by these very sad images you see every day in the press, over time, they'll get tired. They are tired already. So you need people to lead, people who are healthy, people who are, a population that can access education, and a population that can access clean water, a population that can access easy access of food and other necessities. They're not able to, a huge part of South Sudan are not able to access this because of the conditions and what is happening in South Sudan right now. These people need a break. So these leaders need to find a way to agree on a consensus, on a framework that will be beneficial, not for them, but for the people of South Sudan, them aside. It's time they started thinking about this population. That they've been holding like a dangling carrot, over them. It's not fair. from my own personal view, I don't think it's fair what these leaders are doing to the South Sudanese. So let's see how that will play out. And of course, also the fight for Tripoli, fighters loyal to the Libyan government of the National Accord during clashes with the strongman Khalifa Haftar's forces at Hira. It's still happening, and at least so far 264 people have been killed and over 1,200 wounded in weeks of fighting. This is a report by World Health Organization that came out on Tuesday. So far, the people that have died in the war that is going on in Tripoli, in Libya, at least 264 people have died, and over 1,200 have been wounded, and thousands of others have been relocated. So those are not very good news. Headlines coming are from that part of Africa. And also remember the global forum that was happening in China, and that our president and our opposition leader Raila Odinga went together, not really together, but they attended that, and it really caused some ruffles in the country. And now the US is said to have kept off the Chinese Global Forum. Remember, the US have been really having jitters on the gains that China is making in the continent, and China is becoming very influential. Yesterday, as we were looking at why it's easier for the African countries to go to China and get these loans and get this infrastructure funding from China is because China's, whatever it's very minimal. They don't care about your democracy. They don't care about your human rights records. They don't care about anything that a lot of the Western countries will care about, so it's easy to get that loan because, like we like calling it, Dr. Matanga like calling it here, they don't care about your social contract, and how is it that you're leading your people, so they just give you the loans. So the US has been getting worried on how much influence China is having on the African continent, and now Washington will not send officials to Beijing summit on Chinese President Xi Jinping's signature global infrastructure project, the U.S. Embassy said today amid a raft of disputes between the two powers. Leaders from 37 countries and officials from dozens more are expected to attend the Belt and Road Forum from Thursday, that is today, to Saturday, but Washington has dismissed the initiative as a vanity project. Now, the United States has no plans to send officials from Washington to the Belt and Road Forum, a U.S. Embassy spokesperson told news agency AFP. So the US, as much as they think this is a vanity project, I'm sure they're very worried. They're very worried. Sorry, because a lot of Kenyan leaders will come from China very happy with the loans, having signed contracts, having signed things, and so yes. And of course, the latest from Sri Lanka. Remember the Easter Sunday bombings that happened in 4 hotels and 3 churches that left has now, the death toll stands at about 359 today, and more than 500 people were wounded. We've seen a lot of burials happening yesterday and the other day. Indeed, that's a very sad situation in Sri Lanka, and we continue to pray for them. And yes, indeed. So that is just some of the news making headlines across the world, not just in Africa, that I think is of interest to us and we would like to know about. And remember, right now in Tanzania, authorities in southern Tanzania have ordered workers and school children to remain at home as the country braces for Cyclone Kenneth. Now, Mtwara Regional Commissioner Gelasius Biakania issued the directive after the Tanzania Meteorological Agency warned that winds of up to 200 kilometers per hour and torrential rain could hit the Lindi, Mtwara, and Ruvuma regions. Authorities have urged people who live in also mud houses to move to safer areas. So Cyclone Kenneth is expected to make its falls today in Tanzania and also I think in Mozambique. So it's really worrying, and that is a situation that we are monitoring for you, and we'll be giving you updates as we continue. It is expected actually today, and so yes. And also some other news from Tanzania. Remember, President Pombe Magufuli has been seen as trying to be, it's not like when he was campaigning to get into power. Right now he's seen as sort of a dictator and is trying to shrink especially the space for democracy in Tanzania. And the latest is that Tanzania on Tuesday denied blocking the publication of a critical International Monetary Fund report that accuses President John Magufuli's government of undermining economic growth. You remember he's been at loggerheads with the IMF and also I think Belgium and some other country because of his very stand on various issues that, those countries feel are important, but Magufuli says this is not a priority to him. And that included one that I think had problems with because he came out and said girls, teenage mothers who have gotten pregnant while still in school should not be allowed to go back to school even after delivering the babies. And that is also a problem because even in Kenya right now, that is a problem that the Ministry of Education is grappling with. There has been a rise in teenage pregnancies and it has become a problem that now the government is seeking to address and finding out what really are the root causes of this. But here's my problem. This is a child, 13, 14 years, 12, I don't know. Maybe, and a lot of cases, like in Kenya, it has been found that some of these people, the perpetrators of this, who have impregnated these girls, are teachers. A big number of them are they're teachers. So while you're denying this girl an opportunity to go back to school and make her future better, I don't think it's fair for the girl. I don't, as much as it is a mistake, because President Pombe Magufuli was arguing, if this girl, should they be allowed back to class, then they will corrupt the other girls. I don't know if that holds 100% truth. I doubt. That is my personal opinion. But I think that two wrongs cannot make a right. Because a girl got pregnant at 13, 14 years, of course, it should be discouraged and it should not be encouraged by any means possible. But also they've made a mistake. So if they've made a wrong and by the government denying them the right to go back to school, that is a wrong. So two wrongs cannot make a right. And this young girl here with the baby, what kind of future are we expecting them to have? So when Tanzania President Magufuli took such a stand and he said, these young girls who get pregnant in school will not be allowed to go back to school. And there are some funds, I think Belgium or also the IMF wanted to give to Tanzania, and they held back the money and they said, no, you have to correct that statement. And also the other one that was very controversial, he said, we are not going to allow same-sex marriages in Tanzania. So, that is also a cultural thing. Africa, we are not very open to some of these cultures that are considered foreign. So I understand where President Magufuli was coming from. And I don't even want to discuss that part. But my issue was with the girls, the teenage girls' mothers not returning to school. I think by denying them that opportunity, education could change their lives. Education changes lives. So when you deny them this chance, I think that you're not really helping. And in the future, you'll have the cycle of poverty will just continue, because a lot of these girls comes from disadvantaged backgrounds, and maybe it is the lack that makes it easier for these predators to lure them with the small gifts and little money here and there to go buy even sanitary pads and things like that. That they find themselves in this situation. And I'm not trying to make a case for them. I'm just saying, allow these girls to go back to school. I've hosted a women's show before, and I've spoken with people who made very poor choices when they were young, but somebody somewhere allowed them a chance, and they were able to make a very good, life out of the situation that otherwise would have been very hopeless if somebody never really gave them another chance in life. So let's just allow these girls another chance in life. I think it's very important. You never know. Out of that, they might use their experience to, be a good influence to some of these girls. I don't know. It's just my thoughts. I mean, that is something very close to my heart. So on that, I don't agree with President Magufuli. But on the other one, I don't want to talk about it because, Anyway, so that is that. So anyway, so right now, the International Monetary Fund is accusing President John Magufuli's government of undermining economic growth with unpredictable and interventionist policies. I don't even know what that means, but they're saying because he's sort of disagreeing with a lot of their policies. So they're saying, you know, the report that was supposed to come out, and it was leaked and only seen by Reuters, said that IMF was not, the IMF said was not made public after Tanzania authorities did not consent to its publication. The fund said a weak business environment and the implementation of projects that may not have high rates of return were likely to constrain annual GDP growth. So there is a research and a report that was made by International Monetary Fund in regards to Tanzania's business environment right now, and also the the growth that is being economical growth that is seen to be declining. And the report indicated, I think, some of the areas that the government might not be doing right, and that is contributing to the slow growth and is undermining economic growth in Tanzania. And the government did not agree with that, so they did not agree for the allegedly for the report to be made public. But of course, Reuters somehow get a hold of that. You think IMF leaked that to Reuters? Yeah, something WikiLeaks was very good at. I'm sure they might be having that report right now. Remember, the founder, Julian Assange, was arrested a few weeks ago. So yes, so also yes, Magufuli, he's been seen to be not be, especially to be in fight with the opposition, introducing very interesting laws that seems to curtail and to continue shrinking the space, the democratic space in Tanzania. So he's been at loggerheads even with the opposition every other time. So, and in Egypt, Egyptians have overwhelmingly approved a referendum constitutional changes that could allow President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to stay in power until 2013. And the turnout was about 44.3%. And the National Election Authority said 88.8% of those took part endorsed the proposal. So, and he will be allowed to seek one more term in 2024. And his second term will be extended from 4 to 6 years. And of course will be allowed to seek another term in 2024. So he's expected to be in power to 2030. And that is the chairman of the Africa Union. Yes, indeed. So when you go there with issues and matters democracy, you can imagine how Mr. Al-Sisi is going to handle that. And that is where we find ourselves today. So it was expected that Dr. Matsanga was to join in this hour, especially to talk about is Africa going through voluntary recolonization, and he's held up somewhere. He was doing some work, and so he might not be able to finish on time to join us for the remainder of the show. But I believe he'll come on our next broadcast, and he'll be able to look at this matter in depth. But I'll just take you through some points here. Is Africa going through voluntary recolonization? And please, you can share your sentiments, and I can share with the rest of our viewers. Boy, you're saying the Tanzania president is full of himself. He does not have to run over everything. He has to give a chance systems to work. Let those girls go back to school. I agree with you, Omboy. Thank you very much. And Emmanuel Nyakonda, you're saying just like Museveni, the dictator coming to officiate a national trade fair in Zimbabwe, will investors come? All right. Nong Chu, you're saying greetings from Ambazonia to Punchline Africa, to you, Dr. Matsanga and Miriam. Nong Chu, thank you very much, and thank you so much for watching. And Emmanuel, you're also saying we had Indians. I remember they were far better. What are they now? Okay, thank you so much. Agum quote, you're saying true that China never care. No, China does not care about some of these things. At the human rights records, democracy, no, they don't care. They don't care, and that's why they find it easier our leaders find it easier to go there and, you know, no strings attached in that sense, but really there's a lot of strings attached in the long run that is underlying that our leaders are not sometimes very smart to see. I'm just saying. So anyway, is Africa going through voluntary recolonization? This is something Dr. Matsanga will look at later, but just quickly, of course, the word recolonization is certainly not something we want to hear or we want to even to think that is happening in Africa today. But when you look at the events that are happening and how, you know, the rest of the world is slowly coming in and taking over some of even our economies, then you stop to wonder, are we really being recolonized? Are we fully even, you know, are we fully independent as Africans? You know, if we can't even fund our own elections. Are we even, you know? And of course, a closer look at most of the problems that Africa faces. One sees the ghost of colonial imperialist hidden hand in one way or the other. Look at cases like Libya, South Sudan, the scourge of Boko Haram in Nigeria, and now the so-called terror threat in Cabo, you know. In northern Mozambique, remember, there's also a very active terrorist group there going on right now. They're killing a lot of people. It's not out there in the world, but it is something that is happening. And sometimes I see news coming from Mozambique, and they're killing people, and they're slowly gaining ground. And before we know it, it will be like Boko Haram. So I think that also needs to be tamed before it gets out of hand. But some of these things, they have, when you look at them very clearly, they have a hand, and a lot of it, it's being sponsored by you know, an outside interest. And so why is it that the instability, of course, especially in Africa, sometimes happens in areas that are highly concentrated with natural resources? That is something that we have to keep asking. Do they benefit, you know, when these instabilities happen? Are they able to just come in and scoop out, you know, some of these resources, and you're just there fighting each other? Sometimes you don't even know why you're doing it. You are born, you found people fighting, you just continue with the fighting, and you don't understand who at the end of the day is benefiting from this fight. So the instabilities that are being seen in some of these areas that are highly concentrated with natural resources, why is it that is happening? Why is it that African countries that have a lot of that are endowed with the natural resources, they're the ones that have been very unstable? That is a question that we need to really ask and keenly interrogate as Africans. And of course, many of the problems that Africa faces today lie squarely on the shoulders. You know, we'd want to sometimes sit and say, you know what, the colonialists are responsible for where we are today. As much as that could be true to some extent, you know, because years of colonization really held us back for a very long time. So now we are just playing catch up, as I had explained earlier. But have we also, you know, allowed this to happen by allowing a recolonization of our countries again? Are we aiding in recolonization of our countries? Are we doing anything to stop? Are we doing, because, you know, a lot of times our leaders, and I've seen it even here in Kenya, they're happy with the international community, with a certain country, as long as they're sort of agreeing on a certain interest. But immediately, say a country starts asking for accountability, or started questioning some of the things or some of the agenda, some of policies, you know, that we have in place, then our leaders are very quick to say, oh no, we are a sovereign nation. We do not want anybody from outside to tell us what to do. This person that you're telling not to tell you what to do is actually funding for the education system in your country, is actually funding for the ARVs that the HIV and AIDS people are getting in your country. You can't even give that. It's actually funding for the free malaria treatment that you're able to give in your hospitals. So this person, let me tell you something, has a right to question some of these things if they feel that is not, the policies or whatever you're doing is not working for their interest. Most of the times they will come in and they will question. You know, but those are some of the times that our leaders will go there and start declaring that, you know what, we are a sovereign country, we are independent, we don't need anybody to tell us what to do, and And that normally happens when they fall out with these external influences. And as I had read earlier, and maybe I'll repeat that, in 1965, Nigeria was richer than Indonesia. Let that sink in. And Ghana was richer than Thailand. That was in 1965. Also in the same year, but today, Indonesia is 3 times richer than Nigeria, and Thailand 5 times richer than Ghana. And in the same year, in 1965, Uganda was richer than South Korea. Yes. You know, and in 1967, Zambia also was richer than South Korea. All right? And now these countries cannot even compare. So where did we go wrong? Or where do we go wrong as African countries? When you look at such statistics, you stop and it's just a very sad situation. And that explains, I think, a lot of this, especially underdevelopments and things like this, that allows us to be vulnerable to other people to come and help us. When they come, of course, they'll come with their own interest. I think has come out from especially poor leadership that we have been having in Africa. And of course, the corruption in civil service and the corruption. And so, you know, the Europeans and our former colonial masters, when they see opportunities like this, they'll come back and help rule us again and end all these civil wars, all this corruption. You see them pumping a lot of money in fight against corruption. You see them coming, sending their armies for peace processes. You'll see them coming in and help revive our economy and help us maintain law and order and, you know, develop our infrastructure. Guess what? We have allowed them in our systems again, and without us knowing, they're actually very much so recolonizing us. And we've never thought about it. Yes, because when they come, as much as we benefit, we sort of benefit from that, in the long run, they're doing it for their own interest, to protect their own interests. And so these are some of the things that we need to look at. And do you know that America, as we speak today, has something called African Command, or AFRICOM, that was formed after 9/11, and the United States has speeded up the development of its troops on the continent in the name of fighting terrorism and homeland security. So they have their own army, you know, in Africa. It's called AFRICOM. And it is stationed in different countries in Africa. And that happened after the 9/11, you know. And the Russians were currently negotiating with Sudan to open their first African military base on the Red Sea, the Russians. And the Chinese have already established their military base in Africa, in Djibouti. All right? So they're really taking base in Africa. And in Somalia, I can't even begin to tell you how many countries have set base in that. You will be shocked. You will be shocked. And even the locals, especially in Somalia, are tired of you know, these foreigners. Like every part of Somalia has been scrambled. Like there's a different foreign power there. There's Russia. There's different countries, you know, with different interests in have taken over. And so, of course, these are just some of the challenges, some of the things that Africa finds itself in today. But because at this time we have voluntary, you know, allowed these people to come back and to, you know, and to recolonize us, or to tell us what to do, or I don't know what word I would use, but also an increasing now number of a very younger generation, especially from Africa, is starting to insist on accountability within Africa itself. You know, we have seen awakening of younger people. When you look at places like Algeria, when you look at places like Sudan, and the recent coups, toppling of these leaders, and the increased political awareness that is among the young Africans. You can tell that the younger generation is becoming very woke, as they like to say. They're woke, but they're becoming very aware. Even in South Sudan, the younger generation there is very aware. And in other African countries, we see, especially in these countries that have these long-serving leaders, have very record of poor, bad governance and poor governance, and a very poor record of human rights, You know, we've seen that the younger generation in these African countries is now starting to insist on accountability within Africa itself, as they, you know, they want people held responsible, and they're insisting, instead of blaming, you know, colonialists and the imperialists and these people who came in for our perpetual misery, they're now saying perhaps we should start looking at the tyranny that is going on in Africa, the corruption that is going on in Africa, the poverty and the disease, and what are the causes, and these very bad things that millions of Africans have to endure in their lives every day. Where is this coming from? And us as a younger generation in Africa, what can we do about it? So we're seeing increasing voices of young Africans coming out and really speaking out their minds and demanding for change, as we have seen the 22-year-old that made headlines in Sudan, the lady. And you know, in a place like Sudan, women are not that vocal. So that really was something, and tells you that the younger generation in Africa has refused to be quiet anymore, and they're ready and willing to come in and be part of the process and the change they want to see in Africa. And if you not call them to the table and there's no seat for them, they have proved, and they are saying they will come with their own seat and they will find their own space on that table, and you're not going to ignore their voices anymore. And that is a message that they're trying to send out there to this, especially the tyrants that are still remaining in this continent. And Nong Chu, you're saying, Miriam, without the contribution of French African countries, France will be less than a third world country. The UK will be provided food assistance by African countries. It is a shame that African leaders and countries do not know their value. That is very true. I hear that a French economy has been held by the contribution it gets from its former colonies in Africa. So I agree with you, Nong Chun. Thank you so much for those sentiments. Koang Pa Chol, you're saying you're watching us all the way from Denmark. And Jennifer Mueller, you're saying what? Behind the tent, come on. As I told, okay, Trump after ile meeting, wanasemanga, never wake a sleeping dog. Okay, never, yes. All right. Thank you so much for your company today. Dr. Matanga will be coming later in our show. He's held up somewhere, so he was not able to be with us for today's show, but I really want to thank you for your company, and I want to thank you for being with me today. Just a quick recap. Remember, there is a Cyclone Kenneth expected in Tanzania today. So everybody there, please, especially if your areas in Lindi, Mtwara, and Ruvuma regions, please keep safe. And authorities are saying if you're living in a mud house, please find a safe area to go. And also, what are the news was making headlines? Of course, Libya, after the leaders met in Egypt, the AU leadership on Tuesday, they agreed to add Sudan 3 more months so that they can constitute a civilian administration. So that is something also that we looked at in the show today. And of course, 3 major transitional military council members in Sudan that the protesters were demanding for their resignation resigned yesterday. So maybe that will appease the protesters. And maybe they'll go back home, but that is not possible because today the protesters were organizing a 1 million people march to march again to the military headquarters. So protesters in Sudan are not relenting at all. And remember, the protesters are coming from across the country of Sudan. And also we looked at South Africa. Of course, very sad news coming there. 60 people were reported dead and hundreds were displaced in the aftermath of torrential rains and landslides that swept the eastern parts of South Africa. And of course, the port city of Durban and KwaZulu-Natal province have been affected heavily. And of course, other parts of Africa, some countries also have been affected by these heavy rains that we have been experiencing. It is a blessing, and also it's coming with a lot of challenges. So a lot of deaths have been reported. And of course, Boeing has reported a 20% fall of profits, especially and because of the lower deliveries of 737 MAX. This comes after the 2 crashes that happened in Ethiopia, and also last year in October it happened in Indonesia. And so they're still going to issue clarity and a report surrounding the 2 crashes. They've not issued an official report yet, so we are waiting for that. And Ghana has launched a drone delivery service to deliver medicine to remote parts of the country that are hard to reach by road. Why? And Ghana was the first country to gain independence in Africa. Why are we still having some parts of the country that are hard to reach by road? What is wrong with the leadership of Africa? Build the infrastructure. Drone, in the long run, I don't think it's the best solution. So, yes, but anyway, kudos to them for now. And of course, Nigeria's labor minister says he's not concerned by doctors moving abroad in search of work because the country has enough medical personnel. That he was speaking of the problem of the so-called brain drain. The minister argued that Nigeria had too many doctors and could afford to export the talents elsewhere in Africa and across the world if it was needed. So I want to thank you so much for your company this morning. This has been Good Morning Africa. Thank you so much. Dr. Matsanga will be coming in our next broadcast in the afternoon. Right now, this is where our show comes to an end. Thank you for your valued company. Thank you for writing in and engaging with me today. And hopefully we'll see you much later. This has been Good Morning Africa. I am Miriam Mugutu. And for now, it is bye-bye from me.